A game has made more in its first year than anyone will ever make in their life. The army is now delivering petrol, and the Home Secretary might be forced to resign. Keep watching the News Loop for that and more. The army has been put on standby to ensure the help of the current fuel shortages within the UK. Up to 150 military tanker drivers will prepare to deliver to forecourts which have run dry because of panic buying. The surge in demand came amid fears a driver shortage would hit fuel supply, which is plentiful at refineries. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said, "We are starting to see panic buying moderately with more grades of fuel available at more petrol stations."
You create a situation where people start to queue, other people see the queue, and on it goes. Fortunately, when it comes to tanks of petrol in people's cars, unlike, for example, toilet rolls or pasta at the beginning of coronavirus, there's only so many places that you can only store a single tank of petrol. You can't then store it elsewhere very easily. So this will resolve itself. But I'm very, very keen to put in place this massive package of measures today to make sure that people are reassured. And in return, we're asking people to be sensible, only fill up when your car actually needs filling up, and this would then resolve itself.
The government has said, though, that needless buying has led to this shortage in the first place. And it's this panic buying that many people are also blaming the media for this panic buying. The main reason being that obviously if the media did not bring this to someone's attention in the first place, then the panic buying may not have started. So it's quite interesting to see how this whole development will carry on. If the army does end up bringing in fuel, will that then ease the issue, or will it continue to be a larger issue down the line in the future? The skipping Sikh has also made his mark in the news recently, once again putting a new movement forward, announcing that he will enter the London Marathon. Rajinder Singh, also known to many as Skipping Singh, hopes to be the first person to skip over the finish line of the marathon when he takes part in the race on the 3rd of October. He will reach the milestone age of 75 during the Save Month and wants to use it as a chance to encourage everyone, regardless of their age, to stay active.
I learned this from my father, as he was Second World War soldier. One day he showed me how to do skipping, and since then I carry on skipping. You can test your stamina, your body, everything. I will do finishing line, skipping, and I show to people, if I can do it, you can do it.
More than 6,000 people are calling for the resignation of Priti Patel, the Home Secretary. This has obviously followed since the recent extradition case put on the West Midlands Three. For those of you who don't know, the West Midlands Three were 3 Sikh activists who were born and bred in the UK who were accused of the murder of Rulda Singh, an extreme right-wing leader in India. This case was acquitted in 2010, and yet for some random reason the Home Secretary signs off on the extradition of these 3 Sikhs just a couple of weeks ago. However, this case was taken to the Magistrates Court last week and was completely dismissed, and even human rights lawyer Gareth Pearce made a statement.
I've been asked to explain what's happened today. What's happened today is exceptional. This case was always exceptional. A request was made by the Indian government for the extradition of 3 men whom the government must have known, on the evidence it produced, were innocent of the charges. They must have known because the Indian government today withdrew the case, abandoned the case, on the basis that they had no evidence on which to charge. This is an extraordinarily serious matter, that a government, knowing the evidence it has, can go against 3 men in another country and hope to obtain their extradition to India. Now, there are more reasons than the lack of evidence. There are more reasons than the lack of evidence to drop the case today. This case is being tried not for the first time in this country. What the Indian government did not tell the court was there have been trials of this case of other men in India over many years, and they have all been acquitted. And the judgments in those cases, serious judgments by Indian judges, have said that the evidence, the same evidence that is produced here, was fabricated, that witnesses were coerced, that witnesses did not say what the prosecution said they said. How can it be that prosecutors are able to try and try and try again on the same discredited evidence? Now, in some ways, it's a disappointment that this case has finished in this court without the defence evidence being heard. The defence evidence would have been important to tell a convincing history of the behaviour of particular police towards the Sikh community. The repeated use of legislation of enormous reach, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. We in the defence were astonished when we began to understand the record of how people in India can be arrested and proceeded against year after year without ever having been brought to trial. This case, if it had been heard in full, would have had importance to understanding the process of law as it's brought against the Sikh community in India. Would have helped to understand how brave lawyers in India are combating these repressive laws. And it would have helped to understand how it is that a British man, Mr. Johal, has been detained year after year after year on evidence of the same kind, a wafer-thin case based upon a confession that's come from torture. But of extreme interest to us in investigating was that police officers in this case, being used to support the prosecution, had themselves been convicted of involvement in disappearances, torture and murder, had been convicted and yet had continued to serve as police officers. And one of those officers, we were astonished to note, was one of the officers identified by Mr. Johal as having been involved in his torture. All of this is relevant to what steps can and should be taken by this country in relation to the position of people like Mr. Johal, a British citizen in India at the time. And we hope that what comes out of this case is a recognition that it isn't fitting to simply accept what a government says, but a duty to inquire far further. Now, we know that there are many MPs in this country who have expressed their concern, expressed their support for the defendants in this case. And we hope that what we've learnt in this case can lead to real change and real recognition, and that the Foreign Secretary will now take up arms in the case of human rights of people who are detained there. So we've had a learning exercise, and it's our duty, I think, now to share it.
Whilst we were stuck indoors during the pandemic, millions of people escaped lockdown by visiting Teyvat, the home of Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact was one of the craziest games that came out during coronavirus pandemic. In fact, it was so big that it reached a total of $1 billion in monetary transactions was completed in the first 6 months. Since the release of the character the Raiden Shogun in September, reportedly MiHoYo earned $9 million in just 2 days. Fans, however, are extremely annoyed at the lack of rewards provided on the anniversary. With the majority of gacha games, as well as JRPGs and MMOs, anniversaries are a time when the developers give back to the players with huge rewards and even free god tier items or characters. However, in this case, the gamers have received minimal gifts in the form of online events that all rely on chance, as well as a package of rewards which are the exact same rewards you get when you join the game. 10 intertwined fates, a few hero wits, and a bit of Mora. So it's very, very interesting to see how such a great game that has recently been released with such a great following now might meet its downfall. Many players are also petitioning against MiHoYo, so it will be interesting to see how the player base reacts and how the developers react. The top US general and the defense secretary are to be questioned about the US's withdrawal from Afghanistan. US troops had to accelerate their withdrawal, originally due to be completed by the 31st of August, after Kabul fell to the Taliban on the 15th. There were chaotic scenes at Kabul airport as foreign powers sought to get their citizens home and thousands of desperate Afghans begged to be rescued. General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin will speak before the Armed Services Committees of the Senate on Tuesday and the House of Representatives on Wednesday. With the withdrawal of the US forces already under speculation by the media as well as other senior journalists, it will be very, very interesting to see how General Milley and the Defense Secretary respond to the public's questions. That's all from me. I've been Rajveer Singh. Good night.